Okay, we're all set to go. Welcome, everybody, to the April 25th Planning, Development, and Environmental Quality Committee. And here in the chambers, we have a couple of folks. We have Andy Zepp from the Land Trust, legislators Randy Brown and Greg Mezey, and quite a few people on the Zoom. So thank you for joining us today. And first thing I want to see if I have one person that emailed in for public comment. So I'm going to read that and then I'll see if there's anybody else there. This is from former legislator Martha Robertson. And here are her comments. Greetings, former colleagues. I look forward to hearing the comments and discussion on the state's climate scoping document from Department of Planning and Sustainability staff later in this meeting. This is a critical time for local governments to weigh in on the state's plans. A tremendous amount of groundbreaking work has gone into creating the scoping plan, which is the most detailed and thoughtful roadmap we've ever had to guide our transition off of fossil fuels. I believe we need to strongly support the work of the Climate Action Council and its advisory panels. And I urge the legislature to offer that support. During the public hearings that have already been held, there has been a significant amount of opposition to the plan and even to the goals of the law itself, with news reports indicating the fossil fuel industry is mounting that opposition. We have come this far in New York State. We absolutely cannot afford to go backwards. The scoping plan itself is 341 pages, so admittedly it is intimidating to feel you have to dig into its details in order to comment on the plan. But NYSAC, the New York State Association of Counties, has produced a 24-page summary of its major provisions, and the legislature could take a high-level approach in support of the general principles and goals. Alternatively, there could be a deep dive into one section or another in the context of your general support. Tompkins County has made tremendous strides towards the transition we need for government operations and for the community as a whole, but there is much more that only New York State can do in the whole of the economy approach as expressed in the scoping plan. And I urge Tompkins County to weigh in with enthusiastic support for the draft plan. Thank you for this consideration. And thanks, Martha Robertson, for sending in those comments. Do we have anybody else for public comment? Brittany? Thank you. And any proposed changes to the agenda? Okay, and I want to thank, we weren't sure Deborah Dawson was going to be here, a legislator as a member of this committee because she had jury duty, but she was able to make it, so I'm glad about that. Thanks for coming, Deborah. And next up, we have advisory board appointments. So we have two, and there's only two, right? For the Strategic Tourism Planning Board, we have Jeremiah Swain, an at-large member, and Terry Torshos, apologize for the pronunciation if I'm wrong, an at-large member. And so could I have somebody move that? Greg moves that. Randy seconds. And we're going to vote on that. Deborah? Yes. Randy?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So the advisory appointments are pass. Thank you, everybody. And then next we have minutes approval from March 28th. Could someone move that? Deborah moves that. Randy seconds. And we're going to vote on that. Deborah? Yes. Randy?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so they pass. And thank you, Brittany, for doing the minutes. And next, we have the chair's report. I just have a couple of minor, well, I won't say they're minor, I shouldn't say minor, but it was Earth Day this week, April 22nd. And I want to thank the CASE board, the Climate and Sustainable Energy Board, for hosting a forum. It was called Big Changes, How New York State's Climate Plan Could Impact You. And that was hosted by our CASE board and also by our Chief Sustainability Officer, Terry Carroll. And so thank you for doing that. And Deborah gave a shout out to that too at the last legislative meeting. And that was, there was a presentation by Mark Lowry from the DEC and Q&A period. And I found it really informative. That's on our Tompkins County YouTube page. If you haven't seen it, that was April 14th. So you can go ahead and look it up. It really tells a lot about what we, what is in store for us and what New York State is proposing. And as I do agree with what Martha Robertson said, overall, it's a really good plan. And there are a lot of people do have comments, but overall, I am thrilled that New York State is taking this huge step in what I believe is in the right direction to help our climate. And now, and I wanted to also thank, I was just dropping off some safety vests over at our recycling and recycling and materials management department. And they lent us some safety vests because Trumansburg had a community cleanup on Saturday for Earth Day. We also had an electric vehicle show at the farmers market in Trumansburg. And I heard there were similar things around the county that people participated in over the weekend. So thanks. That was Seth Dennis who helped us get those safety vests. So thank you for the help with that, and also some stuff on composting. And next we're going to go to the county administrator's report, and we have Deputy Administrator Amy Hendricks here.
Hi, everyone. I don't have a ton to report for this committee today, but I did want to mention we did put in 6 congressionally directed spending earmark requests to all 3 of our representatives at the federal level, and many would fall under kind of this committee's jurisdiction. The largest being mobile generator for public serving buildings. So that request did go in for just over $1 million, asking for that additional assistance. We also included requests for a solar charging station, as well as potentially publicly accessible EV fast charging stations. And so depending on how these earmarks go forward, we would be creating the programs around them. And of course, there'll be some policy discussion, especially around that publicly accessible EV fast charging station and how we'll continue to keep that on board. But I did want to let you know that we had put those earmarks forward.
Thank you, Amy. Any questions for Amy? Deborah Dawson?
Yeah, I just want to say that Amy's being a wee trifle too humble. When she says we put those forward, she did almost all of the work on those proposals, and I want to recognize that and thank her.
Oh, well, thank you, Deborah. And I will say that without the planning department, as well as highway and airport and other departments. So we had many departments come forward with ideas of proposals and we honed them down, but I did put in a lot of time and others did as well. So thank you.
Well, thanks for that shout out, Deborah. And thank you, Amy, and to all the staff that put a lot of time into doing that in a hurry too. So thank you for doing that. Okay, next we're going to go on to the Recycling and Materials Management Department. And I also just want to put a shout out. While I was at your department today, returning that, I also took all my electronics recycling, and it really adds up. I keep different boxes in my basement for electronics, metal, some old, still have a couple of fluorescent light bulbs that have to cycle through before I change out to LED. So it was really great to bring, that stuff there. And your staff was very nice about helping me figure out what I could put there, which actually in the box, they took everything. So that was great. And so we have Barb Ekstrom here, and you have an update on glass recycling.
I do. I've been coming to you for the last 2 meetings, making mention that this is something that might take place. And I'm happy to report that we've had a goal of being able to provide residents with the option to actually recycle glass at the recycling and solid waste center public drop-off. the current practice since single stream for the last number of years has been that glass has been collected mixed at the curb with other recyclables. And the problem with it is it's very contaminated and broken into little pieces, and it's been used and across the state, across the country as what's called a beneficial use, as a landfill cover instead of, you know, the virgin dirt material. And so this hasn't allowed us to really recycle. So basically, we have a new practice. So people can still put their glass bottles in the curbside, but if you really want to see your glass be recycled, and we'll be doing a lot of public education as we roll this out later in May, you can now have the option to bring your glass to the drop spot. And a few points here: all colors of glass will be accepted. We're going to be doing a lot about acceptable and unacceptable materials, like we do with all of our materials. No Pyrex, no ceramics. And what will happen is this glass will be going to what's called, well, it's a TAMRA facility, which handles in this part of the state all of the bottle bill glass. And it's in near Victor in a place called Farmington. TAMRA runs the facility. They have many facilities across the state and the country. And the material will wind up being separated into colors, and just the same as bottle bill, it's going to be processed into new bottles at either Anchor Glass in Elmira Heights and also Owens, Illinois and Auburn, so locally. The other possibility, and it doesn't happen much, is that it could be turned into the fiberglass insulation as well. So again, public education is going to be forthcoming middle of May, and we're going to help people to know how to do it and help them to understand that glass isn't being quote unquote thrown away either way, but now we can turn our glass into bottles. We don't anticipate for the rest of this year a large amount of tons. We estimated about 20 tons, and this is going to be a pilot program. And the hope is that we're going to evaluate it for continuation in 2023 and hope that this program grows like many of our other drop spot programs. We're going to be measuring performance as we always do. We're going to be including the quality of the glass because we're very concerned about it being rejected. Their limit is 0 of contamination. The quantity shipped, the number of users, where the glass goes, and we're probably going to do a survey so that we can create attention to this at the drop-off and increase the tons. Yeah, that's pretty much the size of it. No changes in the contract are required. And what will happen is there'll be a separate roll-off with like it's an A-frame, and you're going to need to stick your glass bottles into a hole just like you do at the grocery store. So we're one of pretty much none in the state that are allowing this right now. And we think it's just the beginning. So it's been work to negotiate, but we all have it the way we want, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out. Are there any questions right now?
Looks like Deborah Dawson has a question.
Yeah, hi, Barb. Thank you. This is
Sure.
exciting. I know that one of
Happy
the problems we've had with the quality of our recyclables in the past has been that things are dirty. If I could get some advance information before the public outreach goes into effect, do you want these things thoroughly washed out?
Well, it's best to have them thoroughly washed, but 95% washed is okay. So in the case, remember, we're talking about, primarily glass bottles, but in the case of peanut butter jars,
I
Gotta
can't
do
get
a-
those suckers clean.
No, and you just put it in the curbside because we don't want to risk. And we will be sharing a lot. I'm meeting with our communications coordinator and our operations manager later in the week. And we're going to have a communications plan, and rest assured, it'll be the same as we do print material as well as our website, social media. We'll probably have some little cards available for people, but people are so good at contact us on the web and calling us, and we'll just keep getting the information out. And I feel very fortunate that we were able to do this, but I had to push really hard, and it wasn't easy in the beginning because, you know, what's happening essentially is we're taking away a material from, you know, the stuff that was going to the landfill, and instead we're paying for it to be you know, and a less cost separated. So I'm just hoping that in the next few years, there'll be more and more changes like this for us to basically be more sustainable. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
And thanks, Barb. And I'm really glad to hear this news. One question I have, so you're saying it won't be any more cost, or will this be more labor intensive?
Well, there's different kinds of costs, okay? Casella has agreed not to charge us for the actual cost at their facility. I mean, there's not a lot to it, but they're not charging us for that. And we are being charged right now to haul it to Tamra. Now, bear in mind, the fuel price is very high right now. Okay, so we are going to pay for that, but we were able to get a fixed rate that you know, that guarantees us through the end of the year. And then finally, the nominal cost is Tamra. If it's mixed glass, they will charge us, and it's going to vary between $10 and $40 a ton, depending on the market situation. But what I'm hoping to do for next year, again, we have a lot of data to gather in order to best price it. So it's roughly the same as what it's currently costing us. But, you know, the more people that move to separating their glass, it will cost us less over time. It's a process, just like when we started curbside or, you know, food scraps or anything else. And I say we go with it and we do our best.
Okay, great. So there's incentive for us to keep increasing the amount that.
Well, right. And continue. I mean, the key here is because we're setting a model like Onondaga County, they just tell people to go to Tamra because it's not that, you know, there's one in Syracuse, but we don't have that. So we have to haul. We always lose on transportation because of where we're located. But, you know, we'll also be looking at the greenhouse gas emissions comparatively speaking. And of course, you know, intuitively, to not bury something
Is better,
that's in
right?
your
Higher use.
merits. Yeah,
It's a higher use of that.
that's right.
Randy?
And best and highest use. Yep.
Right. Randy?
Thank you. Thank you, Barb. It's a good step forward. Maybe in May, I'll arrange to come down and take a tour of your facility. I'd love to come down.
Please just send me an email when, you know, and give me a couple of dates and times, and we'll arrange to have, there's several people who can do that for you. I think I'd like to have Leo Riley, our operations manager, and my deputy, because he knows it best.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, we could open it up to, I'd like to go. I haven't been in a few years. Yeah.
I think we're still waiting for, I don't know, Amy, where that's at, but we're waiting for our turn to, you know, do a little quick presentation like we did for some of you guys back, you know, a number of years ago, and tour people.
Right. I think it's in your queue somewhere, right? Greg and Randy. Yeah. So, okay. So yeah, it's on the radar. And then, Deb, was there any questions? There was for an information item, the capital payment summary. Any questions or comments for that? Okay, we'll keep it short. Thank you. And Barb, upon your suggestion, I hope you notice we move things around and we're going to try and rotate the different
I thought, yeah,
departments.
I was so excited. Yeah, it's nice to have variety.
Yeah, so thank you for suggesting that, and thank you for Brittany for arranging so we could rotate folks through, so folks aren't always at the end or the beginning of the meeting. Okay, and next, thank you, Barb, for coming today. And then next, looks like we have Jackie here to talk about, we have from the Office of Employment and Training. You have a resolution, so let's get the resolution on the floor first. This is contingency fund request toward reimagining the workplace employment education series, and it's on packet page 18. Can someone move that? Greg, and a second by Randy. Okay, Jackie, would you like to tell us about this?
Sure. Yes, thank you. And I'm going to do a quick screen share if I can take just a minute to do that. I think having a visual might be helpful.
Excellent. Thank you.
So this Reimagining the Workplace education or employment education series is intended to kind of target employers as well as service providers and then job seekers and employees kind of secondary to that. So the idea is that we know that as a result of the pandemic, we've really shifted the focus from, in the employment realm anyway, it used to be an employer's market pretty heavily, where job seekers and employees had to demonstrate their qualifications, do a bit of legwork to show employers that they were prepared for employment. And what we've seen is a big shift to kind of more of an employee market, a job seeker market, where job seekers have a bit more of a voice at the table as far as, what is it that they want to see in the culture of a workplace, what's important to them, not just about, income and salary, but also kind of the big picture of a workplace, the additional benefits and perks, and just having a voice at the table as employees and so forth. So we think that the Office of Employment and Training and Workforce has a role to play in helping to inform or further inform employers about kind of ways in which we can make this a stronger two-way street, so that both employers can have what they need in terms of qualified candidates and be able to retain employees, as well as for job seekers and employees to be successful in finding the work that they need to sustain themselves and their families. And so we have developed, in partnership with other agencies, service providers locally, as well as employers, we have developed an education series that we think can help employers be better prepared. So you can see the outline here of the series. And I'll talk a little bit in detail about some of the consultants and the professionals that we are engaging with to be able to help us facilitate this series. So starting with an LGBTQ plus series, we know that one of the challenges for individuals who identify as LGBTQ plus, there are challenges that people face in the workplace, both in obtaining employment and retaining employment, and also just feeling included in the workplace environment, whether we're talking about rules, procedures, policies in a workplace, or talking about forms and documents, people's rights being ensured. We know that some of these things are challenging for people. And so we are partnering with Dawn Shedrick, who is principal trainer and consultant, also CEO and founder of Gentex Consulting. She's a lecturer at Columbia University, as well as a practicing licensed clinical social worker, who will provide an overview for employers on sexuality and sexual orientation, as well as talk about and teach folks about lesbian, gay, bisexual, and gender inclusive service provision, as well as, in the workplace, what are really key features of a healthy workplace culture that supports and includes people who identify within the LGBTQ community. Milo Primo, who's a founder of Just Roots Consulting. He's also a civil rights attorney. He is also a consultant that we're working with to provide anti-racism and race equity series. So addressing issues of power, privilege, and equity in the workplace, uprooting implicit bias, challenging white dominant culture in equitable workplaces. So addressing things like practices and policies, procedures. I'm gonna move on to next one. So other series that we think are particularly important, reentry series. So helping employers to know how to best serve and work with individuals who are going through the reentry process. We think this is one of the key pieces to, again, employers finding the employees that they need, and then also being able to retain those employees. So Liz Justison, who is a former defense attorney who works with the Legal Aid Society of Suffolk County. We've been actually partnering with her for the last probably year and a half. She provides some pretty extensive training for both employers and service providers, as well as for members of the public, talking about what some of the challenges are that people going through reentry face following the conviction, and then also helping employers to understand ways in which they can help provide second chances for people who are going through the reentry process, breaking down some of the barriers that people face, both in being recruited, hired, employed, and then retained as employees. We are lining up a workers' rights series, partnering with Tompkins County Workers' Rights Center, helping employers to address fair and responsible investigations of internal complaints, whether it's around discrimination or harassment, also helping employers to really see the difference between living wage and poverty wage, and why that's so important at a community level, and helping to ensure that there's equity for people, and that people have the ability to both sustain themselves and their families through their work. And then also helping job seekers and helping employers to know what all is involved in the process of filing a workplace complaint, and that process on kind of both sides of the coin. We're also partnering with Jesse Cohen-Philippic, who is a local licensed psychologist with Reach Medical, and also associate professor of psychology at Ithaca College. She's also already done some training with the Office of Employment and Training, but she would be addressing harm reduction, trauma-informed practices. So helping employers to know and understand what are some of the systemic barriers that people who have faced trauma throughout their lives face if they're coming into a workplace. How are some of those traumas sometimes even re-triggered in a workplace setting where they don't feel supported, they don't feel like they have a voice in the workplace, and how important it is to, again, regardless of where an employee lands in position, that everyone has a voice at the table. And one of the things that we know, I think, as we navigate our way through the pandemic, is just the impact of mental health on the workplace and on all of us as individuals, but particularly people who are in job seeking mode, trying to secure employment and also trying to retain employment. We think mental health is a really critical component for employers to be considering, what the needs of their employees are, including mental health needs. This is particularly important. Another important piece of this employment education series is addressing disability in employment. So we know, like many of these other communities or populations, that so many of these folks are facing challenges both in obtaining employment, but then securing and maintaining it over the long haul. So helping employers to know and understand disability etiquette, disability disclosure, and what a person's rights are on the other side. So a job seeker to employee, and whether or not they have to disclose information about their disabilities, and what the employer's responsibilities are on the other side of that. So ensuring that they understand and can implement workplace accommodations for people who do have disabilities, and then also looking, beyond that into justice and advocacy for individuals with disabilities. And lastly, we intend to wrap up the employment series with panel discussions that involve both employers and job seekers or employees, as well as community members, just so that there's better dialogue, fostering really comprehensive discussions about the workplace conditions and some of the things that have led to unsuccessful pairings between employees and employers in the past, and how we can move forward ensuring that both the employees and employers can have what they need so that employers can be successful as well as employees. So the idea with the whole series is that we would run it first as a pilot series. We're working with Cornell ILR School as well as a couple of partners within the community to collect data on the series to help ensure that we can demonstrate whether or not this is, a successful go at providing this educational series, and then in turn determine what we need to tweak to make it stronger moving forward. And the hope is that in time we would actually have an employer certification come from this, so that employers feel like they have opportunities to train their employees, both frontline employees as well as management and HR. And that job seekers also, when they see that an employer has committed to this kind of certification, it has a meaning and value to it, and will help entice, job seekers to then pursue employment with those particular employers who've invested in that. We think that this is part of the win-win and the two-way street that we want to see developed in terms of changing workplace culture. So glad to answer questions. Again, it's a $20,000 request from the contingency funds. And I did try to make note that we did have additional funding, OET did at the end of our budget year, that we did not use on staffing because we didn't fill one of our positions immediately. And so we're kind of looking at this as a request for that money back, so to speak, so that we can apply it in this way. And we think that it has, potential for broad impact.
Thank you, Jackie, for the presentation and all that information. Does anybody have questions for Jackie? Greg and then Randy.
Yeah, Jackie, thanks so much. This is great. This is really exciting. I think there's some great topics, and I think that there's a lot of employers in the community and folks that would really benefit from this. My question specifically comes around, how do we make sure that the right people get access to these types of trainings, right? Because it's often the people that want to be better in these areas, that are in tune to some of these topics, that are seeking out more information. But then there's probably some folks that really need this information and may not be seeking it out or may not be aware that they need it. So I guess what are you doing to make sure that we're really getting at those that could benefit from it most or could have the greatest impact on?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, and it's something that we're thinking about too. I think the circumstances.
Lost your audio, Jackie.
Jackie, just hold on for 1 second. We lost your audio.
Can you hear me now?
It doesn't say that you're muted. Maybe
Can you hear me
Rob can
now?
help us. Can you go ahead and keep talking, Jackie? Just
Okay,
count
can
or
you hear
something
me
till we
now?
get your audio back.
Can you hear me now?
It's really odd, Jackie, because I can hear.
Deborah, can you say something to see if we have your audio?
Yeah, I'm
Oh, she
saying
is?
something.
Okay, so we've lost audio
Okay.
from the Zoom, so hold on a second.
Well, meanwhile, Jackie, you and I can
Sorry
talk.
about that. We have somebody, we have Rob
Sure.
upstairs working on that. Thank you for your patience. Okay, can you go ahead and try and
Yep.
say something?
Giving it a try again. Can you
No,
hear me
no
now?
audio yet, Rob. We're working on it. but you guys can hear us. So if anybody has any comments, I'll just say a couple of comments since you guys can hear us. I'm really excited to see this series go into practice. I mean, just to be the thought behind working on all these different areas. I'm just amazed. I mean, everything that I could think of, I was like, what about this? And it's in here, the different communities, the different marginalized groups, and then looking at an employer education certification so that if, like Jackie said, if people are looking for a job, you know, and they're wanting someplace that is really community-based, really looking at diversity and the needs in the community. I mean, this is the type of place that I'd want to go look. So Deborah, can you talk?
Yeah, I can always talk.
Nope, nothing yet. Yeah, so yeah, if anybody else has any comments that you want to say while we're waiting, Randy?
Yes, Jackie, you have to listen to me, I guess. One of my questions related to what Greg was saying is how does you reach certain businesses? As somebody who ran a few businesses, it was difficult or hard to find qualified people to come in and actually spend time with a group of people because people travel a lot or whatever. So I think that's important to get to people. My only other question was related to the budget issue and of where the $20,000 comes from. So that's it.
Yeah, when I saw that, you know, for the 20,000 and then looking at that you were trying to get this going last year, but it didn't, you know, you weren't able to get it started last year, and you had the funds in your program. They had their funds for this in their program last year. So now with the new fiscal year, they're asking us to come for 20,000. Personally, I'm in favor of that. Even if they didn't, I mean, this, to me, this is just so worthwhile that I'm hoping it'll be something that, you know, is ongoing, you know, for the community. And then when when we do get audio back from the community, I'll be asking Amy if the county can tag on to this, or are we doing something similar enough? Because I'm just thinking, you know, can the county get certified in this or something? We're still working on it. Okay, still working on it.
On to our presentation.
Can you hear me?
Did you just say something, Deborah?
I was talking to Jackie.
Oh, I can hear you.
We can hear you both now.
The first time we've been excited
Excellent.
to hear you, Deborah.
Oh, so the minute I wanted to tell Jackie a secret, you can hear me. Jeez. But I did have a question for Jackie, though. That last whereas clause where you explained that you had money in your budget last year that could have paid for it, but that was not money that was designed to go to this program, right? That was over money. I'm just thinking that this program is so worthwhile. My inclination would be to just strike that whereas entirely because it's kind of misleading. I don't know how the rest of the community feels about that. I just think this program is so worthy. You don't make excuses for how you didn't use money last year, so you should get money this year.
Right. So Jackie, you are muted right now yourself, so you might be, there you go.
Yep.
And so I guess the question, if I could clarify what Deborah was asking, did you have money set aside last year for this program or not?
The money was not designated for this program. The money was designated for staffing, which we didn't fill a position. And so that actually allowed us to have money both in our WIOA funding, which is federal funding, Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act funds. So half of the amount of money that we anticipate for this series is actually coming from WIOA. The other half is what we're asking for from through the contingency funds. Yep.
So I know at the county, we're working on the rollover funds issue, and this doesn't specifically have to do with that, but just thinking about the culture of our finances, and we certainly wouldn't want anybody to ever, we wouldn't want to encourage a culture, and not saying that this is what happened, but we just to have that right, we wouldn't want to encourage a culture of, well, geez, if we just put off hiring this person, we're going to have this extra money that we could use for this program. So
rollover doesn't work that way, Annie, because any money you save because you don't fill a position, I don't think goes into rollover.
Oh, it doesn't?
No, I think that's an exception specifically to prevent the kind of use that you were discussing.
Okay, so in either case, then Deborah, I'm okay with that being taken out, and it would make it cleaner, I think. Deborah, do you want to propose an amendment to strike the last whereas?
Yeah, I assume that we did move this.
It's on the floor.
It's on the floor. Yes, I will just make a motion that we amend the resolution by striking that last whereas clause entirely.
Okay, and Randy, were you seconding that? Okay, and so any discussion on that amendment? Okay, let's vote on that amendment. Deborah? Yes. Randy?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So we'll strike that last whereas, because at least some of us are saying that we would pass it without that, so we don't need to have that in. So Randy and Greg were asking some questions. Randy?
Maybe Jackie can answer.
Yes, I can, and I'd be glad to. So I think great questions are coming up. I'm going to boldly say that one of the things that we're observing, and I think most any one of us who's navigating this pandemic, observing what's happening with employers, observing what's happening with the workforce, we know that employers are being squeezed in such a way that in many ways they don't have any choice. And so what we think is happening is that, as the shift takes place, I see it similarly to housing market, right? Sometimes it's in the favor of the buyers, sometimes it's in the favor of the sellers. We haven't been in this place in a very long time in which the workforce realm has shifted to the favor of the job seekers. And so that's giving them such a strong and powerful voice that it's squeezing employers in ways that if they want employees, they need to deal with these things. And so we think that naturally is going to push employers to take action, and those who are slower to take that action are going to feel it, and they already are, in terms of not having staff, not having candidates, not having workers in order to fill their positions. So some of that will happen naturally. We also see this there's a continuum, so to speak, right? There's employers who are fully on this and are actively engaged and working on this. They see it and they're working on, they're already bringing in consultants and doing some of these trainings. And then there's other employers still pointing the finger at job seekers and saying, these are lazy, job seekers. We need to get people out of their pajamas, and all of those, stories that we continue to hear. And what we believe is that as we promote the series and as we engage with employers, that employers who need it will come, and employers who aren't yet aware that they need it will eventually be squeezed in such a way that they'll come around. What we're also really trying to do is present the series in a way that feels inviting rather than critical or or negative. What we're really trying to do is say we think this is a two-way street. We think that that both sides here can win, and that we can help support success on both ends if people commit to the training. And for so many years, we've talked all about job readiness trainings. There's been tons of certifications and programs that help job seekers be ready for employment, but we've not really seen something that says, let's help the employers be ready for, successful workplaces. And we think this is, going to be successful. We'll continue to engage with employers and service providers to help us shape what the content of the curriculum is and needs to be. And that's part of why we want to do the pilot, so that we can figure out where the tweaks need to be made and how we can move it going forward. So.
Right, seems like a great time, perfect time to be doing this. Greg?
Yeah, Jackie, thanks again, and thanks for your patience while we figure out the audio.
Sure.
I think, again, I echo sort of everybody's sentiments, and I guess I would just ask that if you could put a little trace in for, at the end of this program to just come back and follow up and,
Yes.
Give us some great metrics and let us know how it did. We oftentimes will hear these great things and don't always sort of get it to come back or close the loop or see it full circle, because if this is something that we should be continuing to support, to Deborah's point, maybe that's a conversation that we need to have for going forward if this does well. So, but please track, because, data is non-confrontational, right? And, if we have strong numbers.
It is.
Contrary to popular belief in the budget committee, Deb, it is. The numbers definitely will tell a story. So, anything you can do to sort of track and set key metrics and things that we can evaluate this by would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Glad to do that, and also really appreciate all of your support.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just picturing like some type of insignia or emblem, on the front page of employers' websites or in their offices, just something to just let people know, or on their job, on their job opening postings and things like that. So this is great. Anything else before we vote on this? So this is the main amendment, the main resolution to pass this and award these funds, 20,000 out of contingent funds. Okay, we're going to vote on this. Deborah?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Thank you very much. And again, as Greg said, thanks for your patience as we had some audio issues to resolve. And we look forward to hearing more about this. And thank you again for doing this.
You're welcome. Thank you, everyone. Take care.
Thank you, Jackie. Bye-bye. And Amy, I had put you on the spot there, I guess, too. Did you want to respond to that question?
I think it's something we can continue to look at. I know as an employer, we've been working with human resources to look at how we're recruiting and retaining employees and, looking at our policies and everything. So I think that there's definitely partnership that we'll be having with Jackie as this program moves forward, and lots of opportunities for both our organization and then for those that we serve.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Amy. And let's see, next we have tourism, and we have Nick Hemholt from our planning department. Would you like to get us started on this? The first thing is tourism program update on packet page 21. Is that where you want to start with that issue?
Sure. Let's start with the quarterly update. So you'll find in your packet there is our memo. We're shifting, for those of you who recall, from HED from once every 2 months to once every 3 months of doing these updates. So they might be a little meatier, a little longer than you've come to expect. But I think that's not a bad thing. You'll just see a little more detail. So included in this update, you'll see our first quarter room tax report is described here in terms of what we well, then I believe that there was already a presentation to this extent from Rick Snyder to the legislature, so I won't belabor that. But if you have questions about that, I will be happy to answer to the best of my ability. I've also just as a nice little segue here to Jackie's presentation, been tracking in these how we're doing on the workforce side of things, looking at our data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics and comparing to where things were sort of in the pre-COVID days for the hospitality and leisure sector. And you can see that the workforce for this sector is still, substantially lower than it was in February of 2020, which is sort of the last data point that was comparable. So a couple other things of note here. The city of Ithaca, as you may have heard, is looking into the topic of short-term rentals and potentially considering some policies around that. So they've requested some data from us. So we've been sharing that as we can. The state is also looking into this, and we're tracking some state legislation on that. So there's a fair bit of activity on that front. Trying to keep track of. The balance of the report here on pages 2 and 3, you'll see our year-to-date allocation of funds table has been updated here with the most recent rounds of grants that have been updated. So you'll see a lot of things that were zeros in 2020 or 2021 are starting to repopulate there as we're able to issue more awards to more organizations around the county. And then more exciting, I think, is the event calendar on page 3, which reflects, all the things that we have funded that are still upcoming on to date. So make sure to try to check out a few of those if you can. And then a little brief room tax report at the end of that. So yeah, that's my quarterly report for Q1 2022. Happy to answer any questions from anyone on the committee.
Thank you, Nick. Deborah Dawson has a question.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. Yeah, my question related to the last paragraph of your memo on page 21, when you're discussing this legislation in Albany that would require short-term rentals to report and pay all the occupancy and sales taxes. And I keep forgetting, we have an agreement currently with Airbnb.
Yep.
And that's for occupancy taxes.
Correct.
So VRBO, so I guess my questions are several. Is VRBO not paying occupancy taxes or sales taxes currently?
Some VRBO hosts are complying with the local law and paying taxes. We are working to get all of them in compliance. VRBO as a company does not have a voluntary payment agreement like we have with Airbnb. So we're not getting, the company is not paying on behalf of their hosts. It's not collecting and remitting on behalf of their hosts.
So they're not providing platform-wide reporting and payment.
That's correct. And my understanding is that because of these bills in Albany that are under consideration, they are not interested in engaging with local governments on that, those types of agreements.
Well, la-di-da. Okay. And then, so is Airbnb paying sales taxes or leaving it to the individual renters?
My understanding is that there is effectively a loophole in the sales tax law that makes it so that vacation rentals of this nature are exempt from sales tax, and have been for quite some time. I think it's called the Bungalow Exemption, although somebody who's more proficient in a tax law maybe will jump in and correct that. Basically sales tax does not apply to these in the present form is my understanding.
So, yeah.
It does apply to hotels, motels, inns, bed and breakfasts, the more established commercial lodging options.
They do have to pay.
Yes.
So this gives short-term rentals yet another form of advantage, basically.
Economic, from a price consideration, no doubt.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Randy?
Yes, thank you, Nick. I'm looking at the year-to-date allocation of funds by organization. I'm trying to just make sure I understand the way I'm reading it. So if I look at the Community Arts Partnership, does that mean they received $54,000 in 2020, $74,000 in 2021, and so far $56,000 in 2022? Is that how that?
Yeah, and it's allocation. It's not the exact amount that's been paid out. This is just how much we have under contract with these organizations. So, Community Arts Partnership, they bill us quarterly for the work completed on their contract. So some of that has been allocated for 2022, but not all of it's been paid.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thank you. And I just had one quick question, Nick, and you've probably told me this before, for the room tax for the short-term rentals, do people have to have more than one room or a certain number of days that they rent out to do that bumps up, they have to pay occupancy tax?
No, there's no minimum. If you're charging money for somebody to stay at in your house basically overnight, that's pretty much the definition. I can pull the more technical language, but yeah, there's no nightly minimum.
Okay, so somebody just did, say, one of the college graduations, rented it out for a couple of days, they're still supposed to pay occupancy tax. Okay, thank you.
I believe if you charge less than $4 per night, you are exempt.
Okay, good to know. So if I charge $3.50 a night.
$3.99, Annie.
$3.99. They might not get breakfast for that price. Okay, good to know. All right, thank you for that report. Okay, so next you have a resolution. That's the award of the 2022 Tompkins Outdoor Grants, and that's on packet page 24 with a memo on packet page 25. Can someone move that? Moved by Greg Mezey, seconded by Deborah Dawson. And Nick, would you like to talk to us about this a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I'll give you the update on where we are with the Tompkins Outdoors Grant. So the idea for this program, I should mention, this is the first year we've run this type of a grant program through tourism, and I'll give you a little bit of the background on how it all came to be. So back in 2018, just as I was starting, we were completing the outdoor recreation tourism plan, and in that document, one of the overarching goals of the document was to find ways to help support organizations that were working in this space in a more direct manner. And it laid the groundwork for this grant program. We also reinforced that in the strategic tourism plan that was completed in early 2020. We worked really paused on it due to COVID, but resumed last year as the Outdoor Recreation Committee of STPB began meeting regularly and discussing how to form this grant program and what should be included in it. And they completed their work in the fall of last year and presented a proposal to the full STPB for a set of grant guidelines and a process for running that program. So we announced it in December of last year and began accepting applications in January. It's a two-step application process. The first step is really just a sort of an eligibility questionnaire to make sure that we had the right organizations that were going to meet the criteria. And the second step was a more detailed application that went into trying to weigh tourism impact, the outdoor recreation impact, administrative capacity, and organizational capacity of each applicant. We got 10 full applications requesting almost $120,000. We only had $50,000 budgeted in this year, so as typical with our grants, money requests outstripped the available funding. I think you'll see in the table the 6 awards there that are being recommended, and then the other 4 applications that were not recommended. The general theme of the ones that were not recommended is that the tourism impact for those was very low to pretty much non-existent, and that was the general reason why those were not accepted for funding, even though there were some really great ideas and some interesting applications there. This resolution here is asking for permission to award these funds and these grants. So happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Nick. I thought Deborah had a question, but that must be one of her cats.
No, it's Dot's tail.
That's tail. Okay. Anybody have any questions for Nick? Okay, so why don't we go ahead and vote on that? Deborah?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes, so that resolution passes. Thank you, Nick. And we have Peggy Coleman here next from our Convention and Visitors Bureau, who I know and who's going to talk about her annual report. And just wanted to put a shout out that when you've given your past reports, that's talking about one of the top reasons that people come to this area is for the different outdoor opportunities that there are here. So really glad to see that we have the outdoor grants to connect, with all of this. And so to streamline things, Peggy and her staff had already given a presentation to the Strategic Tourism Planning Board. So if folks didn't get a chance to look at that, you can go ahead and look at that. There was a link in the minutes. I did look at that, so I hope other folks did. And but she also has some information here in the packet. So I'll turn it over to you, Peggy.
Thank you, Annie. Yeah, I always hate seeing myself on TV, so to speak. So hopefully you enjoyed it better than I did. I really want to thank you for the opportunity to share the accomplishments of the CVB in 2021. Our annual report begins on page 30 in your meeting packet. As Annie mentioned, you did have the opportunity to view the team presenting to the Strategic Tourism Planning Board. It's always hard to bring a whole year's worth of work into a few minutes. So I did want to highlight a few things that were in the report, specifically the CVB's commitment to showcasing our inclusive community and some of the steps that we took and are continuing to take was intentional selection of diverse vendors, contracting an agency who is both minority owned and women owned business enterprise certified with New York State to provide us with marketing and social media support. We also sought out media from more diverse backgrounds. We contracted a local photographer to showcase and capture LGBTQ families. We're working with I Love New York to complete an accessibility audit of all of our tourism businesses throughout the county. And that gives us the opportunity for meeting that criteria, not just the CVB promoting those as accessible, but I Love New York promoting as accessible as well. Excuse me. Of course, anytime I have to talk is when I get froggy. I apologize.
No worries, me too.
Sorry about that. And then in addition to the accessibility piece, we've also collaborated more with the Community Arts Partnership to showcase more artists, local artists throughout the county, a wide range of opportunities for people to explore and enjoy our creators. We've experienced growth across all of our social media channels, as well as our website. We saw a 27% increase year over year, and 23% of that was organic search. Visitors who came to our community are the same visitors who visited our website, visitithaca.com, and they also mirrored where the CVB was messaging. And that's really important. It tells us that our targeting is paying off. Also, we did an extensive amount of outreach by PR, and that produced a really significant impact for Tompkins County. We were celebrated in first-tier media publications, most notably Travel and Leisure, Condé Nast Traveler, Better Homes and Garden, and Forbes, Forbes.com. You'll see a whole list of all of the coverage that was generated by the CVB on pages 40 through 43 in your packet. I also have a shout out. It was really exciting for me last September to be at our first in-person meeting planner trade show and to have Good Morning America filming live at Taganic that very morning. And that created a great buzz as we were getting back into meeting sales trade shows. We know that summer takes care of itself, but winter is our slowest time. And so any visitors that we can generate during the winter time really has a bigger impact to our businesses, as well as to generating sales tax and room tax. And so a few of those items I'd like to call out from the report include the annual Ithaca Loves Teachers celebration. In February, that campaign generates not only room visitation, but also spending in our local retail establishments and our restaurants throughout the county. This past year, we had over 2,000 deals redeemed at 140 businesses. Another thing is we launched the Waterfalls Challenge, a digital pass to encourage people to visit waterfalls throughout the county and to demonstrate that they're available year round. And so that was another way that we could get people to physically come to the destination. They needed to use their phone to check in at the location. They couldn't do it remotely. And also 3 of our top 4 blogs that had the most engagement shared winter travel opportunities. In my Zoom background, of course, is the Taganic Falls. And that visitor center, our visitor experience team welcomed record numbers of visitors at Taganic Falls.
48,000.
Yes, ma'am. And our sales team has been busy as well. They have had the most unique experience engaging with visitors. Trade shows were on, trade shows were not. When you have large gatherings during a pandemic, it certainly made the team be more nimble and flexible. So we participated in completely remote trade shows. We did hybrid events, and we also were there in person meeting with customers. The biggest buzz for all of us is the new conference center coming. We did the groundbreaking back in September of 2021. And to be able to share the news that this is coming online garnered a lot of interest from the meeting planners, especially in the Capital District of New York State. So that was the Reader's Digest version, oral report of the Reader's Digest version of the printed report and video you were able to view earlier. And I'm just curious if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Peggy. And I'm just going to put a shout out to our Tompkins County YouTube page where you can go and look at Peggy and her staff's report on that. I believe it was March 16th. If you're looking by date, that's sometimes the easiest way to find something on our YouTube page. It's 26 minutes. It's amazing the amount of things that they are doing to attract people to this area. But also, it's not just for that, it's for people that are here. I mean, we have so many things that we have to do. I often look at the website and go, oh, okay, I'm gonna do this. I signed up for the Waterfall Challenge, so I'm gonna try and do as many of those and this summer. And so thank you for doing that. So it's a lot of people nowadays do staycations too. So it's most of the activities are free that you can do right here in the community. So thank you for doing this. So any questions or comments for Peggy? Greg?
Yeah. Hi, Peggy. Thanks again. I know I've seen you in a couple other settings recently, but I just want to make sure it's on the record and get out there. I think the appreciation that we as a county and as a tourism community, a hospitality community, and also a retail community right, has, and please share with your staff and express our appreciation. I mean, you read through this report and, year after year, it just gets better and better and better. And there's great information. There's great things to do. And you and your team are doing an incredible job to really make sure that we have such a thriving tourism community. And then also just a thriving community where it's just a better quality of life for Tompkins County residents, right? There's jobs that are created. There's opportunity to relax and enjoy and experience. So I just want to say it because I don't know if it gets said enough, but really appreciate you and your team and all the work that you're doing. And I know that, this has a real impact on many people, especially tourism industry workers. And so can't thank you enough. Excited for next year's report because can't wait to see how it continues to improve, but really just can't thank you enough. So appreciate your time and to put a report together takes a lot of work, but to also have real content to put into a report takes even more work. And so that I think is what we're most appreciative of.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. And I know this committee, your agenda is always jam-packed, and we had originally hoped to have the whole team here. I will relay that information to them, but they are truly the rock stars. They do the hard work. They make the difference in welcoming our visitors and getting them here and doing a great job to make people want to come back. So thank you for recognizing the team.
Yeah, they did a great job in the presentation too. And so I was just really impressed, their knowledge and their ease in talking about all the different, subjects and things that they're doing in the community and pictures of them around, you have a diverse crew here and the different pictures with them around, various parts of the community, including, I'm going to put a shout out for the Honeybee Embassy, which is in the town of Ulysses. It's on Swamp College Road. I live a couple of houses down from that. So it's a hidden gem. They have local honey products that they produce right there on site, and just really, I would say, I would classify them as just regular honey type products, but also gourmet honey products, and they're really, really good. Deborah Dawson.
Yeah, thanks, Annie, and thanks, Greg. And I want to second the expressions of gratitude, Peggy, for the work that you and your staff do. When I went through my agenda and I saw this, oh, you can watch this video, my initial reaction is, oh my God, I have to sit through a 2-hour meeting and watch a 26 video. But I gotta say, I really enjoyed the video. I really appreciated the opportunity to meet your staff, even just virtually. And many of the things that they said to augment the written report were helpful to me to understand why you do the things that you do and how it all fits together. So I really want to thank you for that video I had to watch. And again, also for all the hard work that you do. I did have one question. You mentioned in both the report and the video the Ithaca 101 programs. What exactly are those?
Sure. The Ithaca 101 programs are now virtual. We used to do them in person. Higher education visitation is really critical to us. People come to this destination not just to look at being a potential student. And those potential students, though, are really important to us because we will have them hopefully for at least 4 years, sometimes longer. And so this program is an introduction to our community for students who come, for their families, to tell not just about the things that they can see and do while they're here for orientation, but also ways to get around. It talks about the Park Mobile Pass, talks about TCAT, so that it's a way for families and visitors to move around throughout the community. It helps the audience find the resources. And originally the program was targeted for that purpose, for incoming students that we would do at orientations. but again, a silver lining to the pandemic. The team is actually, Jody especially, did a great job at moving it online. And so now it's being used as a recruiting tool. So if Cornell and Ithaca College are trying to, and TC3, trying to recruit faculty and staff, that's a way that their team gains knowledge. We've focused on undergraduate students in the past, but we've recognized that graduate students, they're another audience that we weren't tapping before. And so it's just a way for us to expand the audience and create lifelong visitors and ambassadors for Tompkins County.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Deborah. I want to say too that a couple of years ago, Peggy, you had, I don't know if you track demographics all the time, but I know what you had added in LGBTQ, and there was a high percentage, so I don't know if it's 16 or 19% of the folks visiting this area you had tracked at one point.
It was 20%, and that was from the visitor profile study that was done at the end of 2019.
Okay.
And we're kind of due to update the research, and I'm sure Nick will have some updates and further conversations. We do track demographics. Our team tries very hard to do it in a thoughtful and meaningful way. We don't want to invade people's privacy. And so we gather information. When we meet them in the visitor centers, we gather information if we're able to during chat features. But that research really does help us see if we're able to move the needle.
Great. I know we have quite a lot of places around the county that are destination wedding type places, or I guess you could, of course, you could have your wedding here locally too for local folks. But whenever I see them put up there, talk to them if they're just starting, I'm always trying to encourage them to put, what is obviously some LGBTQ couples rather than just straight couples or more diverse people of different colors too. I just want to read something really quick from Fodder's Travel Gay Guide to Upstate New York. Since it's become legal for same-sex couples to get married in the state of New York, let's see, the Finger Lakes area is seeing a new rise in what they call the pink dollar, so that luxury resorts are catering specifically to the LGBTQ traveler and creating themed packages in hopes of voicing their acceptance. I know if I was looking for a place, I would really want somebody to see it on their website. So I'm not just saying this to you, I'm just saying this to businesses. To really be inclusive, you need to have it right first, so visible that you're really open and accepting and on that. So anything else for Peggy? So thank you. It's sorry all your staff couldn't come, but we got to see quite a lot of them in the presentation to STPB. So thank you for letting us watch that instead of having them all come.
Thank you. And I just put a link in the chat to Sweet Bow Wedding Collective. This is a group of local vendors who only allow to refer to each other if they are completely inclusive. So Annie, I hear what you're saying, and we're working on that, but that's a local company who is living that. So
okay,
thank you so much.
Great. If someone could pass that on to us, maybe Deborah can, or someone can, or you can, you got it. Okay, we got it here. We got the link here. Thank you very much, Peggy. And thank you for all the work you do. Okay, next up, we have the Commissioner of Planning's and Sustainability's report. Katie, what do you have for us today?
Hi, Annie. Hi, everybody. A few updates for you today. So last week, we moved forward with the over target request that the legislature funded in our 2022 budget for advancing broadband. We released an RFP seeking services of a professional consultant to provide expert guidance on the topic of high-speed broadband internet and how to ensure that all households within the county are able to access reliable connection to high-speed internet. Bids are due May 19th for that, so we're looking forward to getting those bids, and we have a team together, including Greg Potter and Steve Manning from Southern Tier Network, and Nick and myself will all be reviewing the proposals. Another thing is I wanted to update everybody on our staffing. We have recently reworked our job descriptions for 3 positions that are open in our department right now. They have more descriptive titles instead of planner and senior planner. They are sustainability coordinator and housing and community development planner and environmental planner. And we also are recruiting at both the entry level and mid-level to expand the pool and allow additional flexibility to see who applies. And the last thing we did, which I think has been very helpful, is we wrote the job descriptions to allow for bachelor's or master's degrees within 3 months of appointment. So it makes all the people who don't yet have their degrees able to apply and get through the filter of the application process with us. We also took a targeted approach to recruiting. Terry Carroll's actually been helping a ton and figuring out our regional colleges with the departmental degrees we were looking for and reaching out directly to faculty members and people there. And so, all of this has resulted, we wound up having 36 applications for sustainability coordinator. So it's really, and it's a great pool of people. So we're very hopeful that we might have 3 new people on board in June or July.
That is great.
It's been really nice. So I'm not sure what moved the lever on that, or if everything moved it a little bit, but that is a good thing. So let's see. So Anna, you covered the Climate and Sustainable Energy Board, the meeting that we had with them. I also wanted to mention the April 14th, we hosted a workshop for Southern Tier 8 staff to present on the Appalachian Regional Commission grant process. And that whole application process. We had over 20 participants and a lot of interest in the community for those grants as well. And I also wanted to let people know that our staff is working to collect data from our 5 snowmobile clubs on the location of trails that they would like to submit for New York State funding for next winter. Unfortunately, the state is also seeing challenges with their workforce, and they've lost one of their key snowmobile members. So they are no longer using their online system for submission of expenses. So that's adding the burden onto our staff. So I wanted to let you know that. And then I thought it would be just good to mention that in addition to what Nick just mentioned on the tourism program, he and Jennifer Liu in my office are working on preparing 57 contracts right now valued at $2.5 million for various award recipients through all of these grants that you've been funding through the tourism program. And then finally, I know that we report to HHS on our housing work, but just to give a breadth of what the department's working on, I think it's good for this group to know. There's been a lot of activity on the housing front with 10 different affordable housing projects that have been approved by the Community Housing Development Fund program and the entities that fund it, but just a lot of contract extensions, award extensions, modifications. It's a lot with that the program. And our CDBG Healthy Homes rehabilitation program, we got a contract extension for INHS to be able to finish expending those funds. And we expect that program to close July 30th. So that's my update.
Great, thank you. Any questions, comments? Randy? And then Deborah?
Thank you, Katie. On housing, I forgot, I think it was Jay mentioned that housing starts at a 40-year low as far as single-family homes in Tompkins County. And I was speaking to a few farmers, and they're getting requests from a lot of people for people to buy land from them, but they don't want to sell because they're worried if they sell a lot or two or three, it could affect their farmland ag exemptions. And whether that's true, I don't know. I'm just figuring, I'm asking that question, I guess. So I think there's a lot of people that could sell land and may even help some farmers if they could sell some lots. But is that the case? Is that if they started selling lots, would that change the value of their land?
You know, Randy, I don't know the answer to that. That really is a Jay Franklin question. I wouldn't want to mislead people with my off-the-cuff answer on that.
Okay, I'll ask them.
Thanks.
Deborah?
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I want to officially welcome you to the ranks of the Silver Foxes, by the way. But I do have a question. How's Megan doing, and when might we be getting back?
So Megan has returned to work for 2 hours a day. She started last week, so we've been keeping that kind of quiet just because it's not much time. It allows her to help direct us to where to look in the files for all these housing issues that are going on. And, you know, she can help with some of the recruiting and looking at applications and that type of thing. So she's okay. She did say she received the card from the legislature and legislators, and she really appreciated that. I talked to her this morning. So she's hanging in there, and she still doesn't know. She hasn't been able to get the testing she needs to find out what her next step needs to be for her medical issue.
Well, please tell her that, you know, that we miss her and we wish her well. And thanks, Deborah, for organizing the card for her.
Oh, no problem.
That was very nice.
And I don't know, I think since our last meeting, we also had someone else. Did you want to just talk about Scott leaving? I hear he's taking a position as I wrote it down this time, Director of Energy Management and Sustainability at Ithaca College. And I think this will be Scott's last meeting with us.
Oh, no.
He's actually got one more. I strong-armed him into staying till the 23rd. So if we, no, I'm just kidding. He very kindly and graciously offered to stay for one more in case this resiliency plan work is able to wrap up some more components. He's done such a tremendous job over the last couple of years on that program. I think both he and I were hopeful that he'd be able to stay and present as much as he can of that.
Well, thank you, Scott. We're going to miss you quite a bit, and I thank you for agreeing to stay for one more month, one more meeting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And thanks to IC for allowing a long transition here. It's a great new challenge, but it's a bittersweet thing to transition from work that I've liked doing with all of you. So look forward to keep working with you, maybe in different ways, you know?
That's right. And I guess we could roll right in. If there's no more questions for Katie, Scott, we'll turn it over to you. Thank you, Katie. You have the Tompkins County Resiliency Recovery Plan Progress Report, and that's on packet page 53. So
yeah,
take it away, Scott.
Thanks. It's a weird position to be in here, to be, well, of course, transitioning here, but to be talking to you about something that I like talking about. I take a lot of pride in this work, but knowing I have 2 action items on the tail end of this here too. And, you know, when I first tuned in to see the meeting, I'm like, oh, this looks like a good group there that's in the chambers. I should get down there leave my home office. And especially with some of the potential technical difficulties, but I didn't think I could turn around in time. the good thing of being home, I can't feel Andy stare across the room to get to the action items, but I feel it, Andy, so don't worry. I'm gonna give you just a 10 to 15 minute overview of this project again that I take a lot of pride with, and is really partly why I wanted a couple of month transition before I start this new position. So here's an update for you on this work. Again, packet page 53 gives you a little summary memo of where we're at with things with this project. But I did want to hit you with a couple of key components. It's really fast moving updates every day really on this front. So I'll give you some, and then, hey, if I have some other good ones, we have that May 23rd meeting. I can come talk to you about a little bit more. I also wanted to thank Brittany too for sending the follow-up message I had on Friday, just to remind and point you to the climate adaptation page of our planning site that gives you kind of real-time updates of these resources. They're just pretty bulky to send in an agenda packet. So thanks for sending that, Brittany. Okay, so this planning effort, I know I've talked a little bit with you in the past, but these are just kind of a quick hitter update of items. This is again out of a Department of State grant that we're working on for resiliency and recovery planning. And it's a pretty diverse mix of actions. There's 5 different counties throughout the state that are working on these efforts. I think we're doing the best job on this because it's pretty practical what we're doing, but I guess time will tell on that front. So just a reminder too, when we talk about recovery, these are the kind of phases of emergency management. Recovery is that kind of lost area. We know a lot about immediate response, post-hazard event. We know about preparation. We even know about mitigation, but recovery is that area that's a real problem sometimes, and we don't have a lot of focus in many communities on this front. So this is just a little schematic that shows you the types of things that we're working on as part of this effort. You remembered at the tail end of last year, the hazard mitigation plan we worked on. That's a related cousin to this. But then we're working on water supply, drought issues, flood, of course, critical assets, kind of partly connected to what we talked about last meeting with map updates. Debris management planning, something called the community rating system for flood management, but also community economic recovery too. So just as a reminder for a hazard mitigation plan update, this is an effort that, again, is in the same location where Brittany sent you that link to a very detailed plan that helps us identify what kind of hazards we're vulnerable to in our community. And then also the impetus for doing this, every community that's been involved in our county, and every community has been, adopts the plan, and they're eligible then for funding. I'm happy to report to all of you too that as of last week, every community in our county has adopted this plan, is eligible for funding, and actually several are applying for grants in this grant round. But what's great is these resiliency actions are things that we identified in this mitigation plan, but other previous ones too, where we need to do some other things that take a little more concerted effort, which I'll report to you now about a little bit more. Just a reminder, these are the 8 different hazards that we profiled in this mitigation plan. For more interest, take a look. They're pretty interesting to see the history and kind of what we're anticipating moving forward. So our components are broken into 2 parts. We have, and I'll give you a very brief summary, is a water supply drought assessment, a critical asset inventory of kind of where they sit in relation to floodplains and what we can do about those areas to reduce risk. Debris management plan, also an assessment for reducing flood risk in our communities through this community rating system program, and then an economic recovery planning resource too. And as a part of that, that's good continuity of operations tools and trainings we've been doing as well. I'll tell you about in a second. So the idea is, hey, we do these things and we are going to be able to rebound better post-event from hazard events. Economically in particular, a lot of communities, that's a really tough road for recovery. We don't want to be in that front. This is a mix of the different people that have been involved throughout. I just want to recognize them at different points. Different people have been more involved than others in different points. So the first one I'll just profile for you, which you have a link to again on that webpage, but it's a drought assessment. So the idea was in our previous efforts from the 2016 drought events, we were pretty worried about how our systems connected and where we were vulnerable. So what we want to do is have some outside help in looking at those systems to recommend what we could do to improve things. So here's just a couple of things that came out of that. One, they said you should really establish a regional water consortium. So that's of course with our big purveyors. That's in our environmental health department. That's been a huge early success for us. We've had a lot of real positive fronts, a lot of efforts moving forward, including an interagency agreement that's updated from 40 years ago to take more of a forward-looking approach for how we can connect those systems better. This assessment also looks at, hey, what can we do to fund better interconnection improvements? How can we increase monitoring of groundwater to help our systems that aren't reliant on the major purveyors? But also look in terms of improving conservation programs too for water use to help with that too. So there's some more details, of course, in this document on the website I sent you. The other one that we're working on is this interactive map, in essence, that shows where our critical assets are in relation to those 1% annual chance floodplain areas or the 100-year floodplains. And then look at, okay, so you have a location, you know, your municipality that has your city hall that's in a floodplain. What can you do about it? So here's an example of resources that we're working to develop to point people to what you can do about it for this wet proofing mitigation technique. Debris management plan is something else that's freshly completed. This was something that FEMA encourages you to do ahead of time to help effectively manage debris that results as a result of a hazard event. Very interesting process to talk through. Learned a lot from the recycling materials management folks. Randy, your point about the tour with Leo, I highly recommend it. He really brought some great insights to me, and of course, Barb has some great points of this as well. This piece will help us to receive FEMA reimbursement if we have to deal with one of these events, but also get us ready. Here's a couple of key takeaways from this thing. The piece that's really going to activate this thing is actually one of these 1% annual chance flood events. A lot of debris is generated from that, from construction and demolition, but also vegetation. So that's most likely what we'd have to deal with as a result of debris from that. A couple of recommendations that came out of this is, one, we really have to develop and formalize our roles for who would do what as a part of the plan, and we've started to do that. Updating contracts ahead of time. This is something that, of course, our recycling materials management crew talked a lot about that, and also, hey, establishing a reserve fund ahead of time so that we could activate that thing to help us easier kind of respond and get things prepared to process things. But also further analyzing temporary debris management sites. I don't need to probably tell you the current transfer station is in an active floodplain, and so we want to make sure that we're well covered if there is a flood event. So speaking of flooding, this gets a lot of buzz, the community rating system program. We actually had our consultant team from Tetra Tech do an analysis for us that helped us to take a look at this program. And that's available again on the link that Brittany provided. I'll tell you a little about the findings on that. One that I'm really excited about too is hopefully this week, we'll finalize another memo that takes a look at, hey, this program's not for everybody, and you'll see why in just a second. And here's some recommendations that your community could do for advancing flood risk reduction, even without enrolling in this program. So here's the couple quick hitter summaries from this CRS assessment. The town of Lansing was the one that volunteered to be involved for this assessment. They have just 34 policies currently, insurance policies in force, and they pay about $1,200 for that premium. They have about $500,000 in losses over the course of their flood insurance program. It's not the highest in the county by any means. But our assessment that Tetra Tech helped us with said that if the town wanted to, they could qualify for a CRS program at level 8 or 9, which would result in about a 5% reduction for all flood insurance holders in the town. Well, with the limited number of holders, that's not a huge number. So you have, $60 to $100 for each policy holder. And further complicate that, it was estimated based on our research across the country that it takes about 13% of a full-time employee to actually manage one of these programs. So I'm not sure the calculus is there for actually managing this program for the town of Lansing, but other communities in our area may have that. So outside CRS, there's other flood risk reduction actions, and that's the other memo we're working on now to get that out for folks. So that's kind of a summary of the part one, those kind of main 4 components I just outlined. And the idea is we're going to tease out the high priority actions from that to help us think through what we can do together to help reduce risk both in the short term and longer term. The second part of this thing is working on community economic recovery. And it's been a lot of this is an economic focus, quite honestly. It's thinking about, hey, how can we get ourselves back up to speed as relatively quickly as you can in a smart way. But this is also looking at the Department of Emergency Response's emergency management plan has a recovery annex. They're working on updating that plan. This will help to guide that update. Here's some things you want to think about when you talk about recovery, but also how we communicate this moving forward. When we want to roll things out, how do we talk about this? How do we get information out through social media? That'll be part of this. We also have worked on these, what are known as continuity operations tools and trainings, and that's been kind of an interesting piece. I'll just give you a quick summary of. The idea off of this is we'll have our high priority actions as well. So basically these trainings, we did one for municipalities back in March that was really well attended. That's of course also been YouTube archived that you can take a look at. Again, linked down the page Brittany sent you. And there's actually a template too for if a community wanted to do their own plan, what could they do based on Tetra Tech's recommendations. We also last week did one, we realized the business community is totally different for thinking through this topic. And so we did one and large thanks to Jennifer and her team at the Chamber helped us. They actually hosted the training that we did, and Tetra Tech presented and helped to get the information out there and back. So I really appreciate their time in doing that. So that's also, well, all those resources will be archived too to share. And the idea is it's something to help motivate, move things forward in terms of developing plans. It's not something that, people are coming back with their turnkey plans for reducing risk, but it's helping to move forward. And the last kind of piece here is we have a lot of these parts that we're trying to creatively represent and tie together. And so I'm walking through and talking with good folks like yourself through the last month, and this month or into May as well. Getting ideas for how to kind of knit these things together. But we're also trying to work on this story map with our ITS team and Tetra Tech to think through how we can make a more interactive kind of connection between these different connected documents. We also will be doing a broader public event we'll be noticing shortly on May 18th. That'll make sure that you get information on that as well, that I want to push out to all your constituents to let them know what we're doing and get some ideas for how we can help kind of what gaps we have and also what we can do to move this forward. And then we're wrapping up in July. So I'll be wrapping up the key components, and then our crew will help kind of finalize some of the last components too. So thanks for your time on this. Want to see what types of questions you may have, but certainly we can talk offline about that as well.
Thank you, Scott. Any questions for Scott? Deborah, I can't see you, so go ahead and chime in if you have anything. No? Anybody else? Okay, go ahead, Randy.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. This is really well done. Thank you very much. I think it's very important. It needs to a lot of attention. I'm sure you're helping a lot of municipalities deal with this information. I appreciate it, and I'm glad we don't live in Ventura County. So.
You and me both. Yeah, it's been really great to talk to municipalities more about this, to really think about how this is helpful for their operations and realizing this is part of the, capacity building and sharing. And we've gotten great ideas from them too. So it's been very helpful.
Thank you, Scott. You mentioned the FEMA mitigation funding that if municipalities adopt this or accept the plan, then they can apply for FEMA mitigation funding. Is the county also eligible to apply for that?
We are, absolutely. Yeah, there's there's several different grants that we're eligible for part of that. The Hazard Mitigation Grant Program, which is one of those programs, is open now. And then the really big ticket item, which is called the BRIC program, Building Resilient Infrastructure in Communities. And that's a fall call for submissions. Yeah, the county is an absolute applicant. Actually, some of the earmarks we were talking about with Amy and worked on with her are connected with this very issue. You actually have to have a plan for some of those too.
Okay, great. And do you have an idea of how many municipalities are going to be applying for mitigation funding?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd say if I guess, I'd say about 4 to 6, something in that category. I think a lot more in good projects too. A lot more than I think we've seen in future or subsequent years.
Yeah, because flooding can happen just about anywhere around the county. You know,
sadly is one of the great unifiers.
Enfield.
Yeah.
And are you working for the city of Ithaca and the town of Ithaca? Have they? I'm assuming they have very robust plans of their own.
They do, yeah. They've been a great partner with all this resiliency work in the hazard mitigation program. One of the things that the city's done is a smart tack that certainly not all of us can do is, they hired an engineering firm to help them with their applications this year too. And so I think that's going to help them get a little bit further down the road for some of these bigger projects.
Okay, and then so the county emergency management plan, that's something I guess I'd like to figure out how to get more information on. Doesn't have to necessarily be through you unless you or your department, but just trying to make sure that I know and other legislators know, like what's our role during this, where communications and various things of trying to know what our role is. I went to a training a couple of years back, and I can't remember a lot of it now, but it was 3 or 4 years ago. So it'd be good for us as legislators to have an update on that. To go through that training again of what we need to know, what our role is, what we have control over, what we don't, what are, the communications between the various municipalities, EMS, those type of things.
Yeah, it's great. It's very important stuff that a lot of local leadership is talking about too, and wanting to be more engaged with that. And I know Mike Steitley and Jessica too are working pretty closely on kind of how their plan is going to be updated. Actually meet with them next week on that too. So make sure that gets across. Okay,
great. Thank you very much, Scott.
Sure.
And then you have a few other things. Let's see. We have Andy Zepp here, but I know we've had him waiting here for quite a while already. I don't know if you wanted to do these resolutions in a certain order.
Yeah. My suggestion would be that you start on packet page 55, the neg deck for Lick Brook, and then I'll give you a little background on the program as a whole.
Okay. All right, so let's get that one on the floor. As Scott said, packet page 55, making a negative determination of environmental significance in relation to, well, we don't have a resolution number yet, and appropriating funds from the Tompkins County Infrastructure Capital Program for the acquisition of Lickbrook at Route 13 Gateway property. Can someone move that? Moved by Greg, seconded by Randy. Okay, wanted to give us some background on this?
Yeah, this is an important background, whether you've been involved with all the discussions of this program or this is your first discussion. So I just wanted to give you a little background on this, but I think it's a really powerful program, the Natural Infrastructure Capital Program. This was back in 2017, was developed because to recognize the fact that natural systems in our community do play a role in helping mitigate adverse impacts from climate change. And so the drivers of this program were to help reduce downstream impacts to flooding by protecting more upstream properties, but also to establish corridors for habitat improvements and that type of thing. So It's a program that's specifically designed to get money to our conservation partners, whether it be agencies, municipalities, others. We don't want to own these projects. We get money to high priority projects that do pretty detailed things that we have that I'll outline for you in a minute in our guidelines, and to help protect those in perpetuity. We've done 8 projects over the years, over those 5 years or 4 years, 5 years, yeah. And resulting in over 1,000 acres of protection and a lot of good projects. I'll turn your attention to packet page 62. Just fast forward a little bit here. It's going past a couple of actions, but this gives you a little bit more of a background, and I can share my screen if that'd be helpful too. But this gives you an outline of a little bit more on the program, but also a little bit more specifics on this particular project. So I think typically when we talk about the negative declaration for a project, we'll talk about more of the details of that as well. And I can share those with you here in just a second, but I want to pause for any general questions about the program in my very brief overview.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any question, but before, I don't think you need to share your screen, just looking at time-wise.
Sure.
It's all here. So does anybody have any questions? Okay, so this resolution is just about making the negative declaration.
Correct.
Why don't we get that one? See, Deborah is a yes, Randy? Yes, and Greg is a yes, and I'm a yes, so that passes unanimously. Then we'll move on to the companion resolution, which is packet page 61. This is appropriating funds from the Tompkins County Natural Infrastructure Capital Program for the acquisition of the Lickbrook property at Route 13 Gateway property. And I believe there's actually a picture of the property, page 65, right? That's the
Correct.
property. So it looks like it helps create a larger gateway, so to say, actual gateway between a lot of different properties that are already in preserved or public lands, natural areas, et cetera.
That's right. You'll see in that, that gives you good context in that map and the photo. Packet page 62 kind of walks you through the memo of the guidelines. We have very specific guidelines for what even makes these projects qualify. And then we bring that through our planning advisory board for discussion before we bring that to you. But there's more details in there that we can field. But I know that Deborah has a question, but I also want to have Andy provide a little context about this property that you probably all know about, but maybe you didn't know it hasn't been public for a long time.
Yeah, go ahead, Andy.
Sure. And this particular project builds upon an earlier investment where both the town of Ithaca and the county provided partial support for the property we own adjacent to this, which includes significant frontage on the Cayuga Inlet, which is known as our Tappan Mitra Preserve. And it's all connected by the Finger Lakes Trail, part of a green belt. This is modest in size. It's a 7-acre field, but it's zoned industrial. And both the town and the Finger Lakes Trail Conference, and we became concerned when it was going to go on the market. So there were really 2 causes for action. One is it provides some significant buffer to the Cayuga Inlet and Enfield Creek. But also, if you drive by there on a typical weekend, even though it's been private property, there are probably about 15 cars minimum in an informal parking lot there. So we also secured it to ensure the continued, one of the more popular access point to all the trails. It's now part of a contiguous network of about 2,000 acres of conservation land, including Treeman, Buttermilk, lands that we own, and the Botanic Gardens.
Andy, did I hear you say in a previous meeting when we were talking about this that there might be some signage that here's the access and here's parking? Is that correct?
Yeah, in fact, just within the past week, we got bids that were considerably higher. So the one thing in your packet, not that it would affect this grant request, but the parking improvements are going to be higher than expected. We're going to do parking improvements to accommodate 24 cars, because there's also, if you're familiar with that intersection at 13 and 3496, there is no safe overflow parking. So we want to err on the large side given current use. And we will install a professionally designed interpretive kiosk that'll be focused on wayfinding, not just for that exact site, but Treeman, Buttermilk, the whole area.
Great, thank you. Deborah?
Yeah, thank you. And as always, Andy, thank you for all the good work that you and Finger Lakes Land Trust does for us and for Tompkins County residents and visitors. I did have one question about this particular acquisition. Not that I would oppose it in any way, but your capital program application mentions that the parcel would be managed as an addition to the land trust's adjacent Tappan Mitra Preserve. Existing parking lot will be enhanced. An interpretive wayfinding kiosk will be installed. One thing that kind of concerned me about that, and maybe I just don't understand the geography, but it looks like there's like a railroad tracks between Tappan Mitra and this parcel, and how would we deal with that safely?
Oh, well, currently the Finger Lakes Trail has a pedestrian crossing of the railroad, as do we as a landowner. But you raise an issue that is a significant focus of the trail conference. Right now, the trail directs you to a crossing of the creek that no one I've met uses. A lot of people, not myself, of course, trespass across the rail trestle, which you're not supposed to do. So we've been prodding the trail conference to look at constructing a bridge. We've also talked to State Parks, which owns land there. But it's not an insignificant investment. This would be a major capital improvement. The first choice is, if Norfolk Southern is agreeable, you could rather easily cantilever just a basic metal walkway. And that's what we hope will happen. But thus far, Norfolk Southern has not been responsive. But you're right, this is a very popular stretch of trail. But right now, the next need that this access has been secured is a good, reliable creek crossing.
Thank you. Maybe that's something we could consider in the future for this capital fund.
Any other questions or comments? Okay, why don't we vote on this resolution? Deborah?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Greg? Yes. And I'm a yes, so that passes. Thank you, Scott and Andy. And the next one is a resolution on packet page 67, appropriating funds from the Tompkins County Natural Infrastructure Capital Program for the acquisition of the Bell Station property. And can someone move that one? Randy, seconded by Deborah. Okay, Scott and Andy?
Yeah, I'll just keep this brief. This is
Okay.
something we've talked about, of course. I know many of you have talked quite passionately about the production of Bell Station. And I know, of course, Andy's worked very hard on making these connections move forward. I'm proud to move this one forward. This is something that is, in my opinion, an absolute fit for this program. It's partly why we've kept a healthy balance to be able to provide support for something like this at this level. It more than exceeds all of the guidelines and priorities for our program. But I'll turn it over to Andy because he can give you a little more update on how we fit into this production effort.
Sure, and just to report, we are on track to close on this in June. And the land trust sees itself as an intermediary. Ultimately, we hope that 280 acres, including 3,400 feet of shoreline and about 1.5 miles of existing foot trails, will go to the DEC to be managed as a new state wildlife management area. And then the 200 acres furthest away from the lake, based on interest expressed by the town of Lansing and actually the governor's office, we will explore the possibility of using that for solar. The one caveat is the land trust has indicated to AES Solar, that's kind of has spent the most time advancing a project, that we don't want any solar project to enable Bitcoin mining on the adjacent Cayuga operating station, and they're aware of that. So those discussions are underway. So that's this division of the property where our first step will be to subdivide it. But it's a tremendous shoreline resource, both for water quality conservation and recreation. And here we're moving full speed ahead.
Thank you for making that crystal clear about not using any solar energy generated there to go for Bitcoining. I appreciate that. Randy?
Yes, this seems to make sense to me. One of the things I read in maybe one of Scott's previous presentations was that 58% of all solar projects so far have been on high quality farmland. So I don't know what the quality of this farmland is, but that would be a concern of mine. And the other one is when something like this happens where it becomes the property of the Finger Lakes Land Trust, does it become non-taxable at that point?
I'm happy to address both. There are two questions there. One is the land trust is tax exempt for land it owns outright. So for example, the previous property in the town of Ithaca, they're fully aware that'll be coming off the tax rolls. In the case of Lansing, that's one reason I think the town residents, 92% polled, support conserving the lake shore, but many people want to keep the solar component for tax revenue generation. In this case, the state of New York will own the property. Some state lands like state forests make payment in lieu of taxes, but state wildlife management areas do not. So this will come off the tax rolls. And we've spent about 10 years working on this issue, recognizing that is a concern of the town of Lansing. And part of the reason for the solar component, my impression from the town leadership, is to address that recognition that the lake shore itself will be coming off the tax rolls.
Yeah, and just to further expand upon that too, Randy, this is the use of this funds is just focused on the acquisition that's going to be protected, the 280 closest to the lake. The balance, we realize there's connection there, of course, but we take that ag protection very seriously. Part of the reason why it took a little while for us to get this to you was we realized that there is, a currently leased ag resource there. We wanted to make sure that was mindfully thought about. The point, this isn't the highest grade soils at the whole site that you would imagine in North Lansing in comparison to other locations. There are certainly good resources there that are utilized, but not to the level that I think we typically see in North Lansing.
Thanks, Scott.
Okay, ready to vote on this? Looks like
Annie?
Yeah. Oh, sorry,
Yeah,
Deborah.
no problem. I just wanted to direct Randy's attention to page 98 of the packet. The part 3 of the EAF, there's a discussion of the impact on ag. And it says that the land in question has about 10 acres of prime soil and about 20 acres of soils of statewide significance. So while there is some minimal impact, Randy, on prime ag land, it's not that great.
Thanks, Deb.
I'll just make one more point too, because as an active member of the County Ag and Farm Protection Board, I share your concern and take this very seriously and work with a lot of our farm community. We made sure that certainly the environmental assessment and everything was referred to that board, and also we thought through those impacts as well. So the long-term protection, I think, will work in concert with future ag uses, hopefully as well. But I share that concern too.
I also wanted to thank, in addition to Scott, our planning department, and Andy Zepp, but all in the Finger Lakes Land Trust and all the other environmental groups that came out in support, because I know the Finger Lakes Land Trust had been working on the acquisition to preserve this lakefront property for a number of years. And then we had the very big hiccup of New York State putting the property for sale. And so then there was a lot that was done to put pressure on the state and to negotiate that. So this is a long time coming. And so I'm so glad of the outcome. So just Randy.
Just one more comment. I'm very focused on the environment. I do a shout out for my grandmother, Laura McGuire, who was the driving force of Finger Lakes Trail System for decades in this area. So she knows that Lick Brook area very well. My only comment to the Finger Lakes Land Trust would be that I'd like to see your outreach to get more people to enjoy those things that you have protected, especially kids. So.
I should mention, if you haven't checked it out, specifically for that purpose, we launched a totally different website called gofingerlakes.org. And it also has its own social media channels. And it was really just to interpret not just our land, but across the region, where are the best places to go and how do I get there? And the e-news component, we're up to 17,000 subscribers.
Wow.
So it's really thrived, and again, basic goal of making it easy for people to get to these places.
And that's gofingerlakes.gov?
.org,
Oh,
gofingerlakes.org, O-R-G.
Okay. All right, great. Thanks for asking that, Randy. Okay, so let's vote on that resolution for appropriating the funds to Bell Station. It's on the floor. Deborah?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. And then, so that's unanimous, that passes. And then the last resolution is making a negative declaration of environmental significance in relation to this resolution that we just passed. Randy wants to move it. Greg seconds it. Any questions or discussion? All righty, Deborah?
Yes.
Randy?
Yes.
Greg?
Yes.
Okay, I'm a yes, so that passes unanimously, and I see, let's see, and then we have, I apologize for going a couple minutes over, but we'll try and wrap up. So we now have the last thing here, the New York State climate scoping document, Department of Planning, sustainability, comments and discussion. Is that Scott or Terry?
Annie, can I ask one question before we jump into the next thing?
Sure.
I just wanted legislative staff to double check, because normally you do the resolution on seeker first, and so you make that declaration and then you pass the resolution allocating the funding. And I'd like to double check, because it's such an important project, that we did it the right way.
Right, I was just wondering about that.
That was my bad, Katie. I apologize. I did it on the first one, but as I was going through putting stuff on the agenda, it just kind of fell into place. But when it goes on the legislative agenda, it will appear the correct way.
Great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so that should take care of it there for the full legislature. Thanks for bringing that up, Katie.
Yep.
Okay, Terry, I think you're up next.
All right, so I know we have limited time, so we'll try and jump through this. I have just a couple of slides to share with you all, so let me know if you can see my screen now.
Yes.
Perfect. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about the Climate Action Council's draft scoping documents. I'll start off with a little bit of background for those of you that are unaware. So our New York Climate Act took effect on January 1st, 2020, set a few great goals: 85% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2060, 100% zero emissions electricity by 2040, as well as setting a bunch of different targets for energy efficiency, renewables, battery storage. What it also did was it created this Climate Action Council. So it's a 22-member advisory council. There was a bunch of different advisory boards that answered to it. And their goal was to basically put out this scoping document that would allow the DEC to promulgate regulations that would help us reach these goals that was set out by the Climate Act. So what we saw at the end of last year, 2021, was a scoping document that was released. It was 330 pages. Not including appendices, so it's a fairly lengthy document. They're basically, what's going on right now is they're looking for feedback due, I believe, in mid-June. So the recommendations were based on the advisory boards, but it included a few other things, including sector-specific strategies, cross-sector and economy-wide strategies, and an integration analysis. So that scoping document, like I said, covered a bunch of different areas. You know, it ranged from transportation, buildings, electricity, a bunch of different sectors. It looked at some of these cross-sector policies like the gas system transition, local government land use, things that are going to cut across the economy in a bunch of different ways. But it also went into, you know, looking at different pillars such as climate justice, a just transition, public health, and really tried to take an all-encompassing look at how climate change was going to impact New York State and really what could be done to try and reach these goals. That integration analysis that I mentioned, was a big piece of that. They were basically looking to see what sort of, strategies, scenarios might be necessary in order to reach those different goals. And they came out with a bunch of different scenarios, some of them placing a higher preference on some specific recommendations than others. For instance, if you look at scenario 3, it places a much higher emphasis on carbon sequestration in lands and forests and negative emissions technologies than, say, scenario 4, which is very much more concentrated on, things like smart growth and low carbon fuels, et cetera. So, they looked at a bunch of different scenarios, and then they also looked at the cost benefit. And the big thing that they found out in their cost benefit analysis was that they estimated the cost of an action that is to not do anything about climate change, to just continue on as business as usual, to be $90 billion, in deficit. So if we don't do anything, we'll lose out on $90 billion in net benefit versus doing what this plan was really setting itself out to do. So the other thing that they, were at great pains to talk about was that the net direct costs are pretty small relative to the New York State economy. So, they see this as a big win economically, which is something that you don't often hear with this kind of work. So, it's a quick jump through some of that background. I don't want to spend too much time on it, but I can definitely answer any questions. And, as Annie said earlier, we did just have a great presentation from Mark Lowry and the DEC that really covered the scoping document and the Climate Act. So if you want some more background, I really encourage you to take a look at that. What we do want to cover a little bit more, though, is the comments that DPS is making. And so what we've done at Planning and Sustainability is taken a look at the document. We've had, my colleagues, Scott, Joan, Darby, Katie, pretty much everyone in the department has laid eyes on this document and have taken a look at the different sectors and strategies. And we've started to come up with comments on a lot of them. But some of the areas we're not really going to touch, for instance, transportation, we're largely leaving to ITC/TC. Waste, the waste sector, recycling materials management is putting together some comments, so you won't hear me talk about those today. And then some of the things that we felt were a little bit more, let's say, political in nature, we left to the Climate and Sustainable Energy Advisory Board to provide some comments and commentary on. And really what we were trying to do as staff was to focus our commentary on the impacts the recommendations we're going to have on rural communities, local governments, any unintended or unforeseen potential impacts that we could identify, and really addressing some of the technical issues that we saw in all of this. So I'll give you all a couple of examples of what our comments might look like. I will say that it's not by any stretch a comprehensive list of our comments. That's something that, we're still working on putting together, and I'm sure we'll share at a later date, but we wanted to just give you a flavor of really what some of the comments we're making are and what some of the more important things we see in the document to maybe think about in case you yourselves want to make comment. So first off, some of the overarching comments that we're making. In general, we're expressing support for the CLCPA goals and electrification, but also saying that, we'd love additional opportunities for municipal feedback in the future. I think that's something that we feel is really important and something that could strengthen the document and the process overall. If you look at the document, as I mentioned, it's 330 pages. There's well over 100 recommendations, and they're not really rank ordered in any specific way. They just seem to be like a laundry list, so to speak. And so what we think is that there probably is a need for prioritization. I believe Mark Lowry in his presentation said that they want to do all of the recommendations, but even if that's feasible, which some people might argue it isn't, they're not going to be able to do everything all at once. And so I think for us, we'd really like to see some sort of prioritization set out in a new version of the document that, looks at the actions either in terms of the length of time to complete or the ease of completion, or, most especially the impact on greenhouse gas emissions, to really set out what the state's going to work on first and really put their focus into as, things start to unroll and they decide which regulations to, unleash first. So, and then the last piece is a capacity issue and the need for more support. So, I was just talking about all of the different recommendations. There's not enough folks that are working on this at the state level to implement all the recommended actions. So they're going to need a lot more help at the state level. But then there's also our local capacity. And so a lot of the recommendations, are basically asking municipalities to take more on. And so if we're going to do that, we're going to need a lot more support, in order to implement the actions, run programs, apply for fundings, administer the grant opportunities. So I think it's just, there needs to be an acknowledgement at the state level that they're asking for a lot in all of this. And with that is going to come the need for more support. Diving into the sector specific strategies, this is a lot to look at. It's a lot of words. We highlighted the piece that I think is most important for you to focus on, but really, in the building sections, we're looking at a bunch of different comments. These are two of the ones that I decided to pick out for you to take a look at. One of them is around the regulations to improve energy efficiency in existing buildings, and they lay out a timeline basically for phasing out fossil fuel combustion equipment. Our comment is, basically saying that if that's what's going to happen, there needs to be adequate support, both in terms of financial assistance, workforce development, and consumer education. And then last but not least, there also needs to be further research into new technologies, since there are some buildings that are still extremely hard to decarbonize. So if we're phasing out fossil fuels, we need to make sure that we have the equipment and the technology in order to do so. The other one, I think one that is, of a special concern here in Tompkins County with our high rental population is this idea of the split incentive. For those of you that are not aware of what the split incentive is, it's the difficulty that we find in incentivizing energy actions by the rental population or by the property owner populations when, oftentimes one side will be responsible for the payment of the actual improvements and the other side is paying the energy bills. And so they don't always line up in terms of, necessarily wanting to coincide with one another and do the actual work. So, what our comment basically comes down to is that, all the recommendations within the report, they never really cover how they're going to address the split incentive. And until that's done, there's still going to be this big divide on how do we get property owners to make the enhancements on their buildings. So especially since most oftentimes they don't, pay the energy bills on them. So something that we'd really like the state to take a look at closely. On the electricity side, there's a lot to look at there. I think the most important one for us is really the transmission and distribution. We could, cover everywhere with solar panels and wind energy, but if we don't have the transmission lines, it's not going to get us anywhere. And so what we'd really like to see is the Public Service Commission work to fast track some of this electric infrastructure improvements and really try and foster an environment that promotes non-wires alternatives where possible. So really looking at what we can do in terms of demand response, battery energy storage, greater controls, and really just seeing, okay, let's do as much as we can when it comes to, upgrading the wires and the poles, but let's also look at the alternatives that are out there, since those investments are going to be pretty heavy and they're going to take a long time to do. On the large scale renewable side, the state created this Office of Renewable Energy Siting, which is starting to work in terms of getting through some of the large scale projects, but I think there still is more that can be done to facilitate sightings. I think a lot can be done in terms of help, working with local governments to identify priority locations instead of just leaving it to the developers in the market, and then the local governments are blindsided when these things come in. Not as much anymore, but it still happens. I think the other thing that we, also point out is that there is a system currently in place for host benefits to the community or community benefits, but they're maybe not at the level that they need to be in order for the communities to really buy into this. And so if we are going to see communities decide to welcome these improvements or these investments into their community, we'd really like to see the corresponding benefit for the community grow along with it. Right now, it's really not acceptable. And I think you're seeing that reflected in the continued opposition by a lot of communities. For the gas system transition, this is a tricky one to really dive into. I think our comments are staying pretty neutral and just basically saying that if this is going to be done, we want to make sure that it's, ensuring reliability to the customers that remain on the gas line, and that any of the cost burdens aren't placed on those that can afford it least. So if we're slowly getting off of our gas system, let's make sure that those folks that are at the end of the line aren't suddenly stuck with the entire bill. And also, worrying about what happens when, maybe there's a bunch of people leaving the gas system and those pressure values are dropping, similar to what we saw in Lansing, although it's the opposite in Lansing. So, definitely taking a look at reliability. The other piece is a more technical one. It has to do with methane emissions that are 84 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide when you look at a 20-year time horizon. And basically just saying, we know that the existing infrastructure has a lot of leaks in the system. And if we can address those, it could go a long way to reducing methane emissions. So really asking the state to put, pass some regulations and prioritize, trying to fix the systems that exist as quickly as possible and make sure that we're shoring up any leaks of methane that are going into our atmosphere. Land use, we have a couple of, definitely more technical ones, probably ones that Scott could speak more to than I necessarily could. But, the Keep Forest is forest law. It's basically looking at, they set out for, how they think the law should be written. I think we have a little bit of a disagreement. What they were thinking is that, if you were to destroy 10 acres, you have to promise not to destroy another 10 acres. I think our suggestion was more, if there's going to be 10 acres that are going to be destroyed, let's see those 10 acres actually replaced instead of just not destroying an additional 10 acres. So just rethinking how they're setting up that Keep Forest is forest law. Similarly, this use of TIF to fund GEIS, basically just saying a better choice would be to have the developers take on the advantage of the GEIS to cover the fair share cost and not leaving it, kind of generalized on the town and the population. So again, probably one that, Scott could handle a little bit better than I could on this. The local government side, we have a bunch of comments in that, but the ones that I'll share with you today have to do with clean energy siting for local governments. Basically, what we're saying is that we'd love to see more support given to local governments when it comes to clean energy siting. There's been a pilot that's been modeled in Livingston County where they basically gave them funds to hire an expert to work with their local governments throughout the siting process. We'd love to see that happen, not just in Livingston County, but across the state, and definitely, at least on a regional basis and maybe in some of those areas where they're seeing more projects to get a few more than just, one person. Maybe they could use a couple of folks to help them out. Similarly, on the grid interconnection costs, the state has a lot of programs that are trying to prioritize investments on brownfields and on some municipal owned lands. What we've seen in our own, county is that some of the difficulty is that, these sites aren't always located in a great spot for interconnection, which is really impacting the viability of projects. So basically just saying to the state, if you want these projects to go through, we need to see funding allocated, towards supporting, the build out of transmission and distribution to these sites. We really want to take advantage of the brownfield sites. They're usually the least controversial locations to put these large scale renewable developments. And so if we can just make that a little bit more feasible in terms of the existing electrical infrastructure, I think it'll go a long way towards us being able to site these. Adaptation and resilience. So a recommendation that the state has in this document is to basically hire a chief resiliency officer, appoint one at the state level. Basically they'd have a lot of different roles. And what we're saying is, if they do hire this person, could they please have an emphasis on helping the local municipal governments develop their capacity? Something that we'd love to see not only here in Tompkins County, but I'm sure other municipalities across the state would love to see. Scott touched a little bit earlier on the community rating system and how big of a lift it is for some of the municipalities. I think our suggestion on their recommendation is that if they want to see CRS adopted across the state, that there really needs to be some incentives offered that allow for the ongoing and ongoing funding for additional staff that could then implement the CRS system. So what we've heard is about 1/3 of a person's time to implement the CRS system for one municipality. So, that's a lot. Most of our small municipalities can't afford to do something like that. So, we'd really love to see some state funding going towards municipalities to enable them to take advantage of some of these programs. So that's a brief taste. Don't want to go into all of those comments. Like I said, we're still finalizing exactly what we're going to be saying. Once we do finalize our comments, we're happy to share them with PDEC and other stakeholders. Once they're finalized, our plan is to submit comments to New York State, and then we're on to the next document. So New York State has a draft document right now on disadvantaged communities, including a draft definition and a map of what those disadvantaged communities might look like across the state. This is a picture of, Tompkins County, in that little area in purple is our one disadvantaged community according to this definition. So we're going to be submitting comments on that as well. So we'll keep you in the loop as we move on in that process. So that's just a taste of what's going on. More to come, I'm sure, but I'm happy to answer any questions right now.
Thanks, Terry. Deborah?
Yeah, thank you, Terry. I'm really sorry that all of your good work had to be rushed through at the last minute after we had already been through over 2 hours of a meeting. I think this is far too important to try to absorb and comment on and determine next steps at this stage of a meeting. So I'm hoping that as you finalize your comments, we will have another opportunity to hear about them at some leisure. I would love to see your slides and have them sent to me. I am wondering if at some point the county needs to be making comments from the legislature as a whole in the form of a resolution or otherwise that embodies some of the more significant comments and recommendations that DPS makes and recycling and any other department within the county. And also to make some sort of comments that focus specifically on the burdens that this scoping plan and compliance with the CLCPA will have on the county itself. I know a couple of years ago, right after the CLCPA passed, we had Tony and Graffia come to Peak and talk about what the obligations of the county would be to implement CLCPA greenhouse gas emissions reduction requirements. So I guess that's kind of a long rambling statement, but I do think that we shouldn't be done with this issue at this time in this way because it's far too important. So thank you.
Annie, can I reply to
Sure.
Deborah? I just wanted you to feel confident that we did not see this as the last presentation too.
No, I understand that entirely. Sometimes this is kind of goes back to why we separated Peak and HEC in the first place, because we end up with these mega agendas and all of it's important. And it's kind of luck of the draw as to where on the agenda you fall. But when people have sat through 2 hours already, it's, and then you get to this incredibly meaty topic, it's really hard to do it justice. And I feel badly about that in part because of all the hard work that you do. So
yeah, I think we are hoping to have our comments done on the earlier side of things so that would then free up our staff time to be able to help if the legislature wants some help crafting a resolution or even just pulling together all of the different comments from the entities that report to the legislature to make it easier for this committee or individual legislators to comment or pull something together.
Thank you. That's my concern. If we've got all these different departments, and committees commenting.
So maybe, Deborah, would you be willing to discuss this with me and maybe Katie or Terry offline?
Sure.
One, we did talk about at the case board when they were talking about their comments and individually and possibly as a board. I asked if they thought it'd be helpful if the legislature passed something, and at that point we had thought maybe more general statements. I mean, I'm open to it, but more general statement in support, and I could see adding in, as Deborah said, about things that impact us, having it maybe be more succinct. But again, we can think about that and see if we can get something together for our committee meeting next month. All right, well, thank you very much, Terry. And again, thank you to you and to committee members and Brittany and other staff who bore with us through some technical glitches and going over again. We do have a lot of important committees and boards that report to this group. Martha Robertson, I see her hand is up. She had asked to say something at public comment before. So Martha, did you want to say something real quick?
Yeah, thanks so much, Amy. And just as a follower on of the case board, there was conversation about how to integrate comments. And I think there are different roles. The legislature could make a very, very strong statement that would be helpful, that's at a different level than staff or different level than case or than any of the departments. And, I think the legislature doesn't have to agree with every single thing in the plan. Nobody could, but sort of reinforcing the need for this action would really be a powerful thing. And I think the state council really, Bob Howarth, as a member of the Climate Action Council, really expressed the need for this kind of expressed support from local governments. So if I can be of help in writing that kind of resolution, I'd be happy to participate. So thanks so much for taking time on this.
Thank you, Martha. Okay, so again, thank you, Terry and Katie, and especially Terry for your presentation. And as Deborah said, sorry to have to, something has to go at the end of every meeting, unfortunately. And unfortunately, as is the case with this committee, sometimes something goes after the meeting is supposed to be over with. So I appreciate your patience in all of this and all the work that you've done, with the reviewing the plans, the scoping document, and submitting or working and submitting comments. So I'm going to go on to, we have committee members' reports, and unless there's something pressing, I'd like to skip that and then just go right to adjourning and thanking everybody for coming today. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.